Is up, everyone? I am Stuart P. Turner. This is the Flow State Podcast. As promised, new format, shorter, more concise, possibly, returning to the theme of the implications of AI. Look, the subject that people just will not leave alone. AI is still everywhere. We drifted away from it a little bit in the previous conversations, but it was still there in the background, creeping around. So now we're coming back to it a year and a bit on to see where we're at, what's changed, what hasn't changed, how is it being adopted? Have any of those predictions that we made came true? We're going to find out. We're going to find out together. So look, this is the new format, unless you're listening, in which case it's the same format going into your ears. We're going to start doing the show live every couple of weeks. If you'd like to join me for a conversation, please let me know. I've got some guests returning from the previous two series, which I'm very excited about. But for now, today, this is a bit of a reintroduction / update on where we're at in our ongoing whirlwind romance / love affair with AI. Talking through a few themes that are relevant to us at Flow State and my businesses, as well as our clients, and just setting the scene for the next few conversations, basically. So without further ado, let me take you on a little journey of where we're at with our friends, the artificial intelligence tools. So, bit of a recap from where we were in 2023 when we recorded the implications of AI. Everybody was going mental for ChatGPT. It was like normal people had suddenly just discovered that you could talk to computers and that they could talk back, which was obviously great. There was a lot of weird stuff happening. Some of that weird stuff is still happening now. But look, it was very exciting, slightly scary. Feel like that's the same situation that we're in now, but plus a mountain of grifters rushing to start AI wrapper businesses. But look, that's a whinge for another time. So what's been happening since then, and where are we now? So rapid fire, the main themes that have emerged and the big things that have been happening that have been affecting me and the people I work with are these. So we've gone from an exciting proof of concept, hey, I can talk to my computer and it sort of seems like it talks back like a person, to pretty rapid fire enterprise deployment. Now, as someone who was here and for several years was having the why do I need a website conversation, the speed with which AI has been adopted is pretty amazing. Like I was still trying to convince people that they needed a mobile optimized website for many years while I was working in agencies. So to see something be released and then be, taken up so rapidly is both great and quite terrible at the same time. So we'll dig into that in future conversations. But I'm sure you're seeing this in your organization. It's happened really quickly. Look, there's been a lot more firing in the tech industry as well, and that impacts a lot of people. And that, coupled with the fact that AI may well be coming for your job, is not great. There's a human cost to this rapid fire evolution, and it's it's not something to be overlooked or sort of laughed at. Multimodality. Now, in normal people language, that means that AI tools have gone from just being text-based or conversational to now being able to incorporate various different use cases. Like you can produce video, you can produce audio, you can clone yourself creepily. There's a lot of different applications individually, and you can also now upload stuff to AI tools and they can do more than one thing. So, they can go out and they can produce a video and an article. They can go and produce a podcast from things that you upload to them. So they've gone from being, a sort of one thing, does one thing really well, to now does many things, some of them well, some of them not. That's actually pretty awesome, because that's really helping to evolve what previously was just process automation to a pretty awesome degree. As I mentioned at the start, grifting intensifies. Now, I'm building a startup at the moment in addition to running Flow State, and have been, dallying around the edges of the worlds of funding, and I've seen so many just crap businesses launched and apparently having millions of dollars piled into them that are literally just a wrapper for an AI model. Now, fair play if you're making money out of that, and good luck if you've invested a lot of money in it, because I can't see many of those being sustainable, but it's happening everywhere at the moment. And I'm getting inundated with people trying to sell me these shit tools, and I'm like, Matt, I know how you built it. You've just made a logo in Canva and, put a website together. It's like, it's not anything. So anyway, I'll complain about that later. Sex sells, as always. Now, there's a bit of a tragic combination here of, a lot of loneliness, obviously, that I think kicked off or was, maybe intensified through COVID. And hasn't really gone away. And there's a lot of predatory people trying to take advantage of that, but claiming that they're trying to help the greater human cause. So most recently, there's been a huge new spate of, AI companion businesses. There's all the weird thirst trapping that's going on. Hey, you don't even need real women now. You can just make a virtual one. Brilliant. There's a pretty horrible side to all this, to be honest, that's happening. Which was inevitable, and then there's the usual sort of more exciting frontier side of it that's, I think, going to actually turn into something useful. But again, we'll revisit this topic in more detail. Agents have appeared. Notes my disappointment at the lack of Hugo Weaving memes here. So you've heard the word agents or agentic. I'm sure it's the latest thing that everyone's trying to sell you. Agents are essentially an evolution of the AI models. So people are building little, virtual assistants, think Siri, but actually useful, who can go away and actually perform, moderately complex tasks. Like you could tell one to go and sort out your shopping list and tell you where to buy all your groceries, and it'll actually come back and tell you how and where to do that. And it could even go off and do it for you by sort of, I guess, if you trust it to do that, going off and taking your credit card details, for example, and just buying everything through your Woolies account. I wouldn't suggest doing that yet, but, that's where they're going. Interoperability has started to emerge. So I'll talk a bit about the two ways that two of the big companies are tackling that. Again, this is a theme that in any, as one of my friends was saying, in any emerging, sort of industry, interoperability becomes an essential conversation, and it started with AI. There's a whole other separate conversation about the walled garden protectionist nature of the internet. That again we'll get into in future conversations here, but there's some interesting stuff happening. Basically, is the key takeaway there. Excuse me. The SEO industry endures yet another identity crisis. Now, my original background was SEO, which you may or may not be interested in, but the industry as a whole has been almost like a microcosm of digital marketing, in that it almost constantly needs to reinvent itself for some reason, which is massively unnecessary. It's just a new generation of people enters and they want to call it something different. What's happening now is the battle between old school SEO and, insert new letter EO, people being like, oh, we're now optimizing for AI, now we're optimizing for conversation, now we're optimizing for whatever. This is all relevant to us because that will, hugely impact how we're all actually building and delivering our content, and how AI models are finding and using the information that we're producing is obviously of huge concern to everyone. So keen to dig into that again in future conversations. I'm trying to stay focused, which was one of my stated goals at the start of this podcast. And now, brilliant, if you're some sort of corporate bastard, unpaid interns are now available 24/7, right? So, obviously I'm talking about AI models. So instead of just, abusing a human person, you can just subscribe for like $20 now, and you can have an intern that will just work for literally nothing. Now, that's good and bad, because if we're training AI to do stuff, we're not teaching a future generation of actual human people how to come in and help in the industry. And that, coupled with a few somewhat alarming, like, we don't hire juniors kind of conversations I've seen from agencies, is not great if you're trying to enter the digital workforce, because I wouldn't be super comfortable with people learning everything they need to know about work from like YouTube videos or TikTok, and then trying to come in and spend my like $1 million of marketing budget with that knowledge. So I feel like there's a bit of an own goal potentially happening there, but we'll see how that pans out. So look, where we've got to now is AI was like a bit of a fun distraction. It's become an almost fundamental part of a lot of people's day-to-day lives very rapidly, and seems to be embedded in business. Huge amount of risk associated with all of this, because people still don't really seem to understand how a lot of these tools work, what they're doing with data, what are the agendas of the companies behind them. Nobody seems to really be paying a lot of attention to this stuff. Well, not nobody, but, if you believe the hype, then not many people are. So that's the main thing for me in the spaces that we operate in is, governance and compliance and legality is incredibly important. And you can't just throw some unsupervised, data harvesting tool that somebody else runs into your highly regulated, highly secure technology stack. So there's some interesting stuff, basically, still happening, which is why I'm keen to revisit this subject. And obviously, the use cases have evolved pretty significantly, right? So Gen AI spend alone is projected to increase by around 76% this year from last year, which is massive. $644 billion predicted to be invested into the AI industry, just generative AI. Predictive decision support outstrips process automation. So I mockingly say support because I think a lot of people are just letting AI make decisions for them already, which is very stupid, without any kind of interrogation or critical thinking. C-suite in particular are now unsurprisingly linking Gen AI to EBIT upside and not just cost saving. Going back to what I was saying about who's getting fired. Hey, we can make money as well, guys, not just save money. Brilliant. Again, going back to my corporate bastardy comment, if that's you, just think about what you're doing before you do it, please. Industry-specific models are starting to replace LLMs. So there's a lot of crap stuff in a lot of the models, to be honest. Like, they hallucinate crazily, they make stuff up, they sound so confident that if you're not critically thinking about what you're putting in, it's very easy to just be like, oh yeah, that seems great. So what's starting to happen is those huge broad models that launched, people are like, well, they're so broad, they're almost useless, right? What is now starting to happen is closed, sort of closed loop or, segmented or fenced off models that are much more specific, which is what we're building as well, that are trained on a really, really tight use case that just tell you more useful things that aren't just, motherhood level. Hey, you need a marketing strategy for your business. You're like, yeah, no shit. What should I do? And they're like, well, you want to do marketing? That's the conversation you have with the big models. Again, we'll come back to that later. And on-device LLMs are now starting to account for a decent proportion of that investment. So if you have a Google or an Apple phone, you will now have Apple Intelligence, or I forget what the Google one's called. That kind of device level. Copilot, I think, is one of the Microsoft ones. These are all getting deployed to devices to be a bit more personal and useful. Now, I don't know if I'm just bad at using Siri, but I've never found that Siri works very well for me. I've been on Apple devices for quite a while. Apple Intelligence doesn't seem to be working that much better so far. I find them very lackluster, but maybe I'm just bad at using them. If you're having a different experience, I'd love to hear about it. I have found the other AI models are very useful for furthering my nefarious business aims. But yeah, in personal life, maybe I'm just super on top of everything and I just don't need them. I don't know. It doesn't feel like that, but maybe. So anyway, that's the use cases. And then look, the challenges and concerns for me at this stage, I've covered a couple of these, but again, I'm keen to dive into these with some of my future guests. Are data and security and governance. High risk compliance is incoming. Now, the horses may have already bolted from the stables at this point, but as I mentioned earlier, if you're throwing some third-party AI tool into your tech stack or highly secure ecosystem, I hope you've done some serious interrogation of the risk and are managing those risks now, because that's crazy, basically. And this is the big risk for everyone. It's easy if you're doing stuff that's not particularly secure, but I've heard so many stories over the past couple of years of, people just giving unfettered access to data, uploading all their data, like they've got no idea where it's going. You don't know what you're giving away. I mean, you do know you should know what you're giving away, right? But people don't seem to realize. So, again, we'll come back to that in more detail. In connection with the vested interests of the lizard people and or Illuminati. So, the shady behind the scenes characters, in reality, this is the people like, Bezos funding his latest wedding, for example. His agenda's not your agenda, He just wants to make tons of money. He's going to suck in all your data and he's going to use that to make even more money himself. Think about how that helps you before you do stuff. Again, seen a lot of racing to be on the forefront of technology here and not a lot of thinking about how this actually impacts your own business strategy or your own agenda. global divergence and further fragmentation. So going back to that conversation about interoperability, what has happened, which is not surprising, is that AI tools are all evolving in isolation, right? So like the fundamentals are the same, but as with social media and like literally everyone else, the walls have been raised, the portcullis is smashed down. Nobody wants to let you out of their individual environment. You know, everyone's building a tool that only works inside their other tools. That to me and you as end users is useless. That's just causing more hassle for me. And it damages this, you know, this halcyon idea of super efficiency if I have to learn how to use a million different tools and none of them talk to each other. Like that problem just gets worse. And that's what I mean when I say walled gardens get even wallier. Like nobody has any interest in letting me get out of their environment because that's how they make all their money. So the divergence of the interests of LinkedIn, for example, is getting even greater against my own personal interests of I'm trying to use this as a basic business network, but now I have to manage 3 or 4 separate social networks. They all work differently. I'm repurposing content. Yes, I can do it faster with AI, but not that much faster because all the AI tools are separate. So like there's still this huge fragmentation, and I don't care what people say about having made this process super efficient without any human oversight. NAN templates, whatever. I don't believe it. Anyone who's selling that stuff is manually supporting it behind the scenes, or they're doing a crap job. And if you can come on here and prove me wrong, then please do so, because I haven't seen anything that looks anything near the level of efficiency with the level of oversight I would require to deploy them comfortably. So that's a challenge we all face, right? And then, there's a lot of conflicting predictions, right? So we're saying, well, I'm not saying, like, some research agencies are saying, references are included in this deck, that 300 million jobs are going to be disrupted, right? i.e. people may be fired or their jobs are going to significantly change. But then we're also predicting a 7% GDP uplift. So how can that happen? Like, where is the top level human strategy for this? Like, for example, if we're going to have these massive job shifts and changes and, we're all going, white collar internet people like me are going to be unemployed. How am I going to support myself? What am I going to do? Where's this GDP uplift coming from? Are there just going to be a small set of the aforementioned bastards up at the top and then this huge new white collar serf, community who just can't afford to do anything? Like, how's that going to work for society? It's just crazy. So a few things to think about there, basically, is what I'm saying. Now, to dive into some more useful starting points for you, my dear viewer/listener, as you join me on this journey back into the future predictions and current applications of these tools. This is a really good article by Forrester, by Leslie Joseph and Rowan Curran, that states the 9 dimensions of agentic interoperability, which is not a title that rolls off the tongue. But what it does is it covers 9 core areas that I think are a really good starting point just to be thinking about on your own AI journey. If, like me, you are constantly thinking about the future implications of this stuff, are you covering these areas and how are you covering them and what are your strategies around them? It's really good. So again, the link's included in here, but it's a great starting point for the whole agent conversation. So I want to revisit this in some future conversations because it's super interesting, and we'll get into the detail around them. Anthropic are tackling what they call model context protocol. So there's 2 ways that 2 big companies are trying to tackle interoperability. This is one. And Anthropic optimistically use the analogy of the USB for this. So, you've got tons of physical devices, which all used to have back in the old wasteful days, millions of different, IO ports. Like if like me, you have kept all your cables for some reason. Shout out to cable guys the world over. Women seem less excited about that, but maybe there's a few. I've got a big box of cables from the last probably 20 or 25 years of devices. And occasionally I'll pull one out and be like, oh my God, this hard drive that had this crap proprietary USB looking cable, but it was slightly different. Like the launch of USB-A and now USB-C completely solved that problem because you have one cable, one port, connects almost any device, which is great. So MCP attempts to do the same thing across all the different tools and AI models to allow a standardized way of interacting that will make things much easier and more efficient. So again, we'll get into the detail of this. I'll share the links if you are familiar with this already. I'd love to hear if you're using it. I know a few people have deployed deployed MCP very successfully and rave about it. I know some people who are just quite confused about what it is. So this is really interesting, and this is one that I'm following. Google have recently launched what they call A2A, which is agent to agent. Now, this is somewhat more ambitious than MCP, because what Google are trying to do is build a way for agents to find and interact with other agents. So not just the models and the context, but the actual agents people have built. Now, on paper, that sounds really cool. I don't see exactly how it could work at the moment, but that doesn't mean that it can't. Obviously, I'm just one person, one cynically minded person. But look, this could be cool, because the whole idea is like that an agent can go out and they all have a standard way of talking to each other and finding each other, which would allow them all to go out and interact without us needing to be there to, physically connect them. So going back to what I was saying about process automation, at the moment, you might need to build and connect several different agents, or pull in different agents and make sure that they all know what they're doing and they're all talking to each other properly. This protocol or standard would allow the agents to do that independently, which would be awesome. Again, also somewhat concerning for me, but would be really cool. So what's coming next? This is what I want to really sort of get stuck into in this next series of the podcast, revisiting. So everything I just talked about, gonna, bring some people on. We're going to dig into this. As I mentioned, if you would like to come on and talk about this stuff, please do. If you like Stu, I cannot believe that you just said that. I disagree strongly. Definitely come on, because I'd love to have some robust conversation around these things. But look, here's my predictions for top level, the next phase of our life with AI. I think standardization obviously will get traction. Interoperability is essential and inevitable at this stage, which is cool. How fast that happens and what direction it goes in, I don't know at the moment, but a lot of people with some big brains and some big thinking are working on it, which is pretty exciting. So here's 3 predictions from me. Optimistic prediction number 1. Actual sci-fi level, interaction with technology. We can throw away our crappy glass rectangle phone form factor, and we can just talk to computers and they can just do stuff for us. That would be so awesome. Imagine getting rid of your desktop. You just had a little short throw projector and like a little earpiece, and you can just wander around saying stuff and just have things thrown onto walls around you, or get a creepy pair of Sex Pest Ray-Ban glasses and you can just view it all in the corner. Like, that would be awesome, right? So that obviously, without the sex pesting, that would be awesome. This would be super cool, more human-centric, less device-centric. I'm a big advocate of that way of going. Would love technology to move in that direction. So that's my optimistic one. I'm trying to turn over a new optimistic leaf. Here's my second one, the pessimistic one. Imagine if Terminator, Blade Runner, and The Matrix had a baby, and that baby is our future society. So, robot warfare. We've already got drone warfare. I'm not going to even get into the current global conflict situation, but the way in which those wars are being waged is exactly what you'd expect, right? It's like, robot-controlled stuff we can fire at each other. Brilliant. It's cheaper than people, and we can do maximum damage. Like, horrifying use of the technology we've developed. So that, basically, but times a million with AI thrown into the mix. Nightmare. And then, as I mentioned before, a huge new unemployed, disenfranchised group of people with nothing to do, because all we do is obsess over business instead of thinking, how could I be making society better? Where are my community initiatives? What will I do if I don't work on the internet every day? Well, obviously I've got a lot of hobbies and other projects. I would do all those, but imagine me times a million. What are we all going to do collectively? Just, you can't go for coffee every day if you don't have any money, can you? Like, what's going to happen? So that's the pessimistic prediction, obviously with many worse implications. I don't want to depress everyone too much. More realistically, I would say it's just going to be like business as usual. There's one or more bubbles sort of expanding at the moment in this space. I think one or more of them will pop, and something more useful will emerge. Something more interoperable, some new technology, something that we can't see coming around the corner. I also predict, again, not getting into the politics, I just think this is hilarious, that Donald Trump will be selling a phone in front of the White House before the year is out, which I, would love to see in a kind of tragic comedy way. Please don't buy his phone, for the love of God. Imagine what it's going to be like. Jesus. Anyway, that's my predictions. That's where I think we're at. that's the update on AI so far. I would love to hear your thoughts. I've dropped some links to further reading in here. So links to the things that I've just covered, some definitions, those 3 articles that we just talked about. And this is the new podcast. This is the shorter, more concise, more, focused, was it? I don't know, maybe, version. As I mentioned, we're digging back into AI. We're bringing back the implications. I have some of my previous guests rejoining me. I've got some new guests lined up. And if you'd like to join me and have a chat, let me know. I'm going to be back here every 2 weeks, pushing out this video if you want to watch, if you just want to listen. The audio episodes will be coming out at the same time. And I hope you enjoyed the show. I need to come up with some sort of new visual ending. But for this one, I'll just say, see you next time.